What they don't tell you about escaping Rikers Island. The impossible escape attempt. Picture this: a cold, rainy night on Rikers Island. The wind howls across the East River as an inmate clings to the razor wire fence, his hands bleeding from the sharp metal tearing into his skin. Behind him, alarms scream, red lights flash, and correctional officers sprint toward his location. Ahead of him, just beyond the final barrier, lies the black water of the river, the only thing separating him from freedom. The splash echoes into the night. For a moment, silence takes over. He's gone. But here's the thing nobody tells you about escaping Rikers Island. The real danger isn't just the guards, the guns, or the dogs. It's the water, the currents, and the unspoken codes inside those walls that decide whether you even get the chance to run in the first place. And as that inmate disappears beneath the surface, we're left asking, did he actually make it? Or was his escape over before it even began? The prison nobody escapes. To understand the story, we need to go back. Rikers Island isn't just any jail. It's a fortress dropped in the middle of the East River, surrounded by freezing water and guarded by watchtowers that never sleep. From the air, it looks like a city, but once you're inside, it feels more like a trap designed to break anyone who dares to test it. Most inmates know the truth: you don't just escape Rikers. The place is built on fear, routine, and survival. The walls keep you in, yes, but the system of informants, gangs, and officers makes sure your every move is watched. That's why the idea of escape isn't something most people even whisper about. But every now and then, someone tries. And that's when you see just how brutal the price of failure can be. One inmate, we'll call him Marcus, learned this the hard way. Marcus wasn't a gangster, not a shot caller, not even someone with power in the blocks. He was just a guy who hated being caged. He'd study the yard, watch the guards change shifts, and notice the tiny cracks in a system most thought was airtight. And then one night, after weeks of planning, Marcus made his move. He slipped past a blind spot in the cameras and rushed toward the fence. His heart raced, his breath sharp against the cold air. He actually made it halfway up the razor wire before anyone even noticed. That's when it happened. The sirens, the floodlights, and the sound of boots pounding the pavement as guards closed in. Marcus was caught in the glare, frozen like a deer on a highway, bleeding and desperate. And just when he thought he could make one last leap for freedom, he saw something that made his blood run cold. The guards weren't the only ones waiting for him on the other side of that fence. The shadows beyond the fence. Marcus froze, hanging on the razor wire, blood dripping from his hands. But what paralyzed him wasn't the guards storming toward him. It was the shadowy figures waiting just beyond the fence, other inmates. Word had spread inside. Some had been watching. At Rikers, no move goes unnoticed. In prison, if you even think about escaping, somebody knows. Some inmates wanted Marcus to fail, because if he succeeded, it would bring a lockdown for everyone. Others saw a chance to bargain, give Marcus up to the guards and maybe earn themselves favors. And the cruel truth? On Rikers, sometimes the most dangerous enemy isn't the guard with the keys. It's the inmate standing in the shadows, waiting to turn you in. Marcus had planned for cameras, for guards, even for dogs. But he hadn't planned for betrayal. As the alarms kept screaming, Marcus finally threw himself over the fence, tumbling into the muddy ground below. His arms sliced, his clothes torn, his mind screaming with one thought: run. But when he tried to sprint toward the water, he felt a sharp blow to his ribs. One of the inmates had caught him, dragging him down into the dirt. A fist, then another. Marcus was fighting two battles now: escape and survival. Deals in the dark. Marcus staggered to his feet, ribs aching, blood on his face. The guards were closing in fast. But for a split second, the inmates who had attacked him whispered something in his ear. "Pay up, or we hand you over." This was the unspoken part of Rikers nobody tells you. Escape isn't just about breaking fences, it's about buying silence. If you don't have protection, if you don't have a deal with the right crew, your chances are zero. Marcus had nothing to give. No cash stashed away. No gang to back him up. Nothing. So the inmates pushed him forward, straight into the blinding floodlights. They didn't have to drag him. They just steered him, knowing the guards would take care of the rest. The correctional officers tackled Marcus hard, his face slamming against the wet concrete. Hands cuffed behind his back. Boots pressing down on his neck. But just as he thought it was over, one officer muttered something that made Marcus's stomach twist. "Take him to the box. And make sure he remembers this night." The box. The box was what inmates called solitary confinement. A single, tiny cell, sealed off from the world. No sound. No light except a buzzing fluorescent bulb. They dragged Marcus there without a word. His clothes still torn, his body still bleeding. He could feel the cold air of the cell like knives against his skin. Inside, time moved differently. Minutes stretched into hours. Hours into days. And in solitary, escape didn't mean freedom anymore. It meant keeping your mind from breaking. But Marcus wasn't just broken. He was furious. The failed attempt had cost him everything. His safety, his place in the blocks, and now his sanity. Still, there was something else that nobody tells you about escaping Rikers. Sometimes, the punishment doesn't stop with solitary. It follows you. Because just as Marcus sat in that dark cell, thinking he'd hit the lowest point possible, he heard the echo of footsteps. The lock turned. And the door swung open, not for freedom, but for something far worse. The message. The guards weren't alone. Behind them stood an inmate Marcus had never seen before, tall, silent, with tattoos curling across his face. This wasn't random. This was a message. At Rikers, escape attempts threaten the system. They embarrass the administration, they shake up routines, and they make others think maybe, just maybe, they could try too. That's why escapees aren't just punished. They're made into examples. The tattooed inmate stepped inside, cracking his knuckles. The guards didn't say a word. They just shut the door behind him. Marcus backed into the corner, his heart pounding so hard it felt like the walls were shaking. He realized in that moment, escaping wasn't just about beating the fences, the currents, or the guards. It was about surviving what came after. And as the inmate's shadow loomed over him, Marcus knew, his real nightmare was only just beginning. The beating. The cell was silent except for Marcus's quick breaths. The tattooed inmate moved closer, his boots scraping against the floor. Without warning, the first punch landed, hard, straight to Marcus's jaw. His head snapped back against the wall. This wasn't just a fight. This was sanctioned violence. A warning delivered through another inmate's fists. Guards didn't even have to dirty their hands. Marcus curled up, trying to protect his face as blow after blow rained down. Every hit carried a message. Don't try it again. Don't inspire anyone else. Stay in your cage. When the door finally opened again, the guards pulled the inmate out, leaving Marcus crumpled on the floor. His body hurt, his pride shattered, but his mind was still alive. And in that dim light as he spat out blood, Marcus thought of one thing. Next time, I'll be smarter. The Whisper Network. Days passed. The bruises faded, but the scars inside didn't. Marcus returned to the blocks quieter, more watchful. But in prison, silence is never enough. Rumors followed him everywhere. Some whispered he was a fool. Others whispered he had guts. But whispers in Rikers are dangerous. They can lift you up, or bury you. One night, while Marcus sat in the chow hall, an older inmate leaned across the table. His voice was low, steady. You want out? There's only one way. And it ain't the fence. The older man didn't say more. He didn't need to. Marcus felt the hook. Escape wasn't impossible, it was just different than he imagined. But before Marcus could ask questions, a guard slammed his baton against the table, shouting for order. Trays rattled, inmates froze. Then chaos erupted. A fight broke out 2 tables over. Blood spilled across the floor as shouts echoed through the hall. And in that chaos, the old man vanished. A new plan. Marcus couldn't let go of the old man's words. There's only one way. And it ain't the fence. At night, he replayed it in his head, trying to decode the meaning. Did it mean through the tunnels? Through supply trucks? Through bribe staff? He started paying attention again. Watching the kitchen deliveries. The garbage trucks. The laundry carts. He noticed how some staff looked the other way, how others seemed to hide nervous glances. Escape, he realized, wasn't just physical. It was political. It was about knowing who to talk to, what to pay, and when to move. But just as Marcus started piecing things together, a message arrived. A slip of paper tucked under his pillow. 2 words written in shaky handwriting. Stop digging. Pressure from inside. That note kept Marcus awake for nights. Someone knew what he was thinking. Maybe it was the gangs. Maybe it was the guards. On Rikers, both had power, and both hated disruptions. If he kept pushing, he risked more than solitary. He risked disappearing completely. Still, the hunger for freedom gnawed at him. He thought of the river currents, the skyline just beyond the fences, the life waiting outside those walls. But freedom had a cost. And soon, the cost made itself known. One evening, Marcus was grabbed in the shower area. Hands around his throat, a blade pressed against his ribs. The voice whispered sharp and cold. You make us all suffer when you pull stunts. Next time you try, we'll make sure it's your last. Marcus nodded, gasping for air. But deep inside, the fire burned hotter. If anything, the threat only confirmed what he already knew. Escape was possible, and someone was desperate to keep that secret buried. The secret route. Then, like a crack in the wall, an opportunity appeared. Marcus was working in the laundry when a younger inmate slipped him a look. No words, just a look. Later that night, that same inmate found him in the yard. There's a way, he said quickly, eyes darting around. But it's not for free. Marcus's pulse quickened. The younger inmate explained. Food deliveries left gaps, guards were bribed to look the other way, and there were rumors of an old service tunnel beneath one of the buildings. This was it, the kind of thing people didn't talk about, the kind of secret hidden beneath layers of fear. But before Marcus could agree, before he could even process the chance, a loud crack split the air. A fight had exploded near the gates, guards rushing in, batons swinging. In the chaos, the younger inmate was shoved to the ground, his head striking the pavement. Blood pooled around him as Marcus stood frozen. And with that, his only lead, the key to the escape, lay bleeding on the concrete. Silence in the yard. The next morning, the yard was quiet. Too quiet. In prison, silence isn't peace, it's pressure. Everyone had seen what happened the night before. The young inmate who hinted at the secret route was now gone, rushed away on a stretcher, his fate uncertain. Marcus walked the yard, head down, but he felt eyes on him. He knew the rules. When someone connected to you bleeds, questions follow. Did he know something? Was he involved? Was he the reason that kid was hurt? He tried to act normal, but normal didn't exist here. Every step echoed. Every glance carried meaning. And then, just as the yard was about to end, a guard leaned in close as Marcus passed through the gate. His words were like ice. You don't stop, you don't wake up tomorrow. The bribed guard. That threat rattled Marcus. But later that week, he spotted something he wasn't supposed to see. In the kitchen, where inmates scrubbed trays and floors, Marcus noticed a guard leaning against the door with his hand out. A folded stack of bills slid into it, quick, silent, practiced. The inmate who paid him didn't even look up. It was a deal. And in that split second, Marcus realized the truth. The system wasn't airtight. It was cracked wide open. Escape didn't mean cutting through fences. Escape meant cutting deals. That night, Marcus approached the bribed guard cautiously, his voice barely above a whisper. Name your price. The guard didn't answer. He just smirked, tapped his baton against the wall, and walked away. But the next day, Marcus found something slipped into his food tray. A tiny scrap of paper with a single word. Laundry. The hidden cart. Marcus's mind raced. Laundry. That had to be it. Every day, massive carts rolled out of the facility, piled with sheets and uniforms. If one could hide deep enough, survive the suffocating heat and darkness, maybe they could ride it out. The next week, Marcus made his move. As carts were being packed, he slipped into one, burying himself under the weight of damp uniforms. His heart pounded as the cart was wheeled out. The smell was choking. Sweat dripped down his face. He could barely breathe, his chest crushed by fabric. But it was working. He was moving. Then the cart stopped. Marcus held his breath as a guard's voice cut through. Check it. They've been trying things. The sound of fabric shifting. A flashlight beam cutting through the layers. Closer, closer. Then, silence. The cart lurched forward again. Marcus almost cried with relief. He was out. Or so he thought. When the lid of the cart finally opened, he squinted against the floodlights. Guards stood all around him, guns raised. The guard who had taken the bribe leaned in and whispered. Laundry was the test. You failed. Broken trust. They dragged Marcus out, throwing him face first onto the concrete. His body ached, but worse was the betrayal. He thought he'd found a way. Instead, he'd been played. Back in his cell, whispers spread faster than fire. Some laughed. Some shook their heads. Others stayed quiet, because they knew every failed attempt made things harder for everyone else. But Marcus wasn't just broken. He was boiling inside. The humiliation, the beatings, the warnings, it all fueled him. He thought of the river again, of the skyline across the water, of what it would feel like to breathe air without chains. And then one night, he heard a voice through the vent above his bed. Rough, raspy, almost a whisper. You really want out? Meet me tomorrow. Kitchen. Midnight. The tunnel. At midnight, Marcus slipped into the kitchen. The smell of grease and bleach hung heavy in the air. In the shadows, an older inmate was waiting. The same man who had once said, "There's only one way." This time, the man spoke clearly. The fences are for fools. The laundry is for suckers. The real way is older than both of us. Below. The service tunnels. He led Marcus to a rusted grate near the corner. It was half hidden, caked with grease. When he lifted it, the stench hit like a punch. Mildew, rot, and river water. Down there's freedom, the man said. But once you go, there's no coming back. Marcus stared into the darkness, his heart pounding louder than the alarms ever had. He knew this was it, the chance people whispered about but never dared to take. And just as he prepared to climb down, the kitchen door swung open. Flashlights flooded the room. Hands where I can see them, a guard barked. Caught in the kitchen. Flashlights blinded Marcus as guards stormed in. The older inmate raised his hands, silent, while Marcus froze, sweat dripping down his face. The open grate at his feet glared like a guilty secret. Step away from the vent, the officer barked. Marcus thought about running, but there was nowhere to go. The guards slammed him against the wall, cuffing him hard. The older inmate stayed calm, almost too calm, as if he'd been here before. As they dragged Marcus out, one guard leaned in close, his voice low and venomous. Next time, we won't bring you back breathing. For Marcus, it was another failed attempt. But in that brief moment before the grate slammed shut, he caught a glimpse of the tunnel below, dark, endless, leading straight toward the river. The way out was real. The price of failure. Back in solitary, Marcus replayed the moment over and over. The look on the older inmate's face haunted him. It wasn't fear. It was knowing. Almost like the man wanted Marcus to get caught, to test him, to see if he could handle the pressure. But failure has a cost. Within hours, Marcus's cell door cracked open. 2 guards stepped in with batons. The beating that followed was slow, methodical. Each strike was punishment. Each pause was a reminder. Rikers doesn't forgive mistakes. When they finally left, Marcus lay broken on the floor, his ribs screaming in pain, his lips split wide. And still, through the pain, one thought pulsed. If there's a tunnel, I have to try again. Whispers of the tunnel. Weeks later, when Marcus returned to general population, whispers met him. Some mocked him. Others respected him. But one rumor spread like wildfire. Marcus had found the tunnel. He didn't confirm it. He didn't deny it. He just kept his head down. But in Rikers, secrets don't stay buried. One night, as he lay on his bunk, a slip of paper slid under his door. 3 words, shaky but clear. It still exists. The next day, Marcus spotted the older inmate again, sitting quietly in the yard, his eyes locked on Marcus. This time, no words were needed. The message was clear. The tunnel wasn't a myth. It was waiting. But waiting came with risk. Because if he knew, others knew. And if others knew, that meant danger. The river's curse. Marcus couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the river, black water swirling, currents tearing bodies under. That's the part no one on the outside understands. The fence isn't the real barrier. It's the water. Cold, filthy, merciless. Even if you reach it, few survive the swim. Inmates told stories about men who tried. Men whose bodies were found days later, washed up on the shoreline. Men who simply vanished, swallowed by the current. Freedom and death were separated by inches. And still, Marcus couldn't shake the thought, better to drown chasing freedom than rot behind these walls. But as he wrestled with that thought, danger found him again. Late one evening, while walking back from the showers, a shank flashed in the corner of his eye. He ducked just in time as the blade scraped across his ribs. He spun, blood dripping down his side, as the attacker vanished into the shadows. The message was clear. Someone wanted Marcus gone before he ever reached the tunnel again. In pain, but alive, Marcus returned to his bunk. That night, the older inmate approached him through the vent again. "You've been marked," the voice rasped. "The gangs don't want another escape attempt. It brings heat on everyone. But if you want to live, if you want a chance, we move together." A pact. Dangerous, but maybe his only shot. The next day, in the chow hall, the older inmate passed him a folded napkin. Inside was a crude sketch, lines, arrows, and one word at the bottom. "Tonight." Marcus's hands trembled as he stared at it. This was it. No more planning. No more testing. The tunnel was real. The time was now. But as he tucked the napkin away, he felt it, eyes burning into the back of his head. Someone else had seen. The last night. Marcus couldn't breathe easy. That napkin sketch burned a hole in his pocket all day. The plan was tonight. But who else had seen it? Was the threat the gangs, the guards, or someone he didn't even suspect? Dinner came and went. The blocks quieted down. The older inmate passed Marcus one last glance across the tier, a silent signal. Midnight was the time. Marcus lay on his bunk, staring at the ceiling, counting every second. His heart thumped so hard it drowned out the hum of the lights. He whispered to himself, "This is it. No turning back." Then, just before midnight, the silence was broken. The fire alarm blared through the unit. Smoke filled the corridor. Inmates shouted, guards scrambled. Someone had pulled the alarm. Someone wanted chaos tonight. Into the tunnel. In the smoke and shouting, Marcus slipped from his cell. His body trembled with adrenaline. He moved through the kitchen like a shadow, ducking past guards rushing toward the fire. There it was, the grate. The older inmate was already there, prying it open with a piece of bent steel. His eyes met Marcus's, a wordless command, "Hurry." The stench hit immediately, damp, rotting, like the belly of the earth. Marcus slid down after him, the darkness swallowing him whole. The tunnel was tighter than he imagined, dripping with river water, rats scurrying along the walls. His knees scraped on broken concrete, his breath echoing in the claustrophobic silence. And then, up ahead, the sound of rushing water. The river was close. Freedom was close. But just as hope swelled inside him, a booming crash above shook the tunnel. The grate had been slammed shut. Someone knew. Betrayal below. Marcus and the older inmate crawled deeper, the tunnel narrowing. The roar of the river grew louder, but so did the voices echoing behind them. Guards. No, not guards. The voices were rougher, sharper. Other inmates. Marcus's blood froze. He realized the truth. Someone had tipped them off. It wasn't just the guards who wanted him caught, it was inmates too. The older man muttered under his breath, "We've been sold out." The footsteps grew closer, metal clanging as figures dropped into the tunnel. Shadows with blades. The darkness wasn't safety anymore. It was a trap. The older inmate shoved Marcus forward. "Run!" he barked. Marcus stumbled, knees scraping raw, as shouts and footsteps thundered behind him. He had only two choices now: keep going toward the roar of the river, or turn back into the hands of those hunting him. The river's edge. The tunnel opened into a cavern-like space, the ground sloping down into black water that churned and hissed. The East River. The final barrier. Marcus's chest heaved as he stared at it. This was what everyone feared. Not the walls. Not the guards. The water. The older inmate caught up, blood running down his arm from a fresh cut. He shoved Marcus hard toward the water. Jump. It's now or never. But behind them, shadows closed in. The flicker of blades, the echo of snarled threats. Marcus stepped to the edge, the icy spray hitting his face. Freedom waited in that water. Death did too. And just as he bent his knees to leap, a spotlight exploded across the cavern. Freeze, a guard's voice boomed. The leap. For one frozen second, Marcus stood caught between two worlds. Guards yelling from behind, inmates closing in, and the East River raging in front of him. The older inmate shouted, "Go! Don't stop!" And Marcus jumped. The cold water slammed into him like concrete, sucking the air from his lungs. Darkness swallowed him as the current ripped him downstream. His body twisted, waves crashing over his head, salt burning his throat. Above, the spotlight swept the water, voices shouting, guns cocking. Behind, the tunnel filled with screams and chaos. Marcus fought to keep his head above water, his arms flailing against the relentless current. For a brief, impossible second, he saw the city lights glittering across the river. Freedom was there. So close he could taste it. And then a hand, rough, heavy, clamped down on his shoulder, dragging him under. Pulled under. The water was black, freezing, alive with fury. Marcus thrashed as the unseen hand dragged him deeper. His lungs screamed, his chest felt like it was caving in. For a split second, he thought it was a guard who had followed him into the water. But as his eyes adjusted, he saw the outline, the older inmate. The man's grip was iron, forcing Marcus down into the current. Panic exploded in his chest. Was this betrayal? Was this the final lesson, that nobody escapes alone? Marcus clawed at the water, kicking free, his body shooting upward toward the thin slice of moonlight above. He broke the surface, coughing and gasping, just as floodlights locked on him again. In the water, a voice shouted. Shots on the river. The air cracked with gunfire. Bullets tore into the waves around him, spraying white foam. Marcus dove again, the icy water burning his skin, his ears ringing with each shot. He swam blindly, every muscle screaming, his mind racing with one thought: keep moving or die. But the river was merciless. The current spun him in circles, dragging him into a whirl of debris and broken wood. Each time he surfaced, the lights seemed farther away. Then, just as his strength began to fade, a massive shape loomed ahead, the underside of a barge. The current sucked him toward it. If he didn't act fast, he'd be crushed against the steel hull. Chapter 28: The Bargain Beneath the Barge. Marcus barely managed to grab onto a floating plank, pulling himself under the shadow of the barge. Darkness shielded him, the gunfire fading, but the water kept battering him against the metal. Then he felt another splash beside him. The older inmate surfaced, blood streaking down his face. His expression was grim but focused. "You want to live?" the man hissed. "Then you owe me. For everything." Marcus, gasping for air, had no choice but to nod. The older inmate dragged him along the side of the barge, pulling them both toward a tangle of ropes hanging into the water. Marcus grabbed hold, his fingers slipping against the wet fibers, his body trembling from exhaustion. But just as he thought they were safe, a searchlight swept under the barge, locking directly on them. Caught in the beam. The spotlight blinded Marcus, his heart hammering as guards shouted from the shoreline. More shots cracked across the water, bullets striking sparks against the barge. The older inmate snarled, "Climb!" Marcus clawed up the ropes, every muscle burning, his soaked clothes dragging him down. The older man followed close behind, cursing under his breath. For a second, Marcus believed they might make it, climb high enough to vanish onto the deck of the barge, hidden from view. But then came the roar of engines. Patrol boats tore across the water, their searchlights stabbing through the dark like knives. The sound of megaphones echoed. "You're surrounded. Surrender now." The final choice. Marcus clung to the ropes, suspended between the freezing river below and the roaring floodlights above. The older inmate hung just beneath him, his face twisted with rage. "This is it," the man growled. We go back in the water or we get caught. No middle ground. Marcus's mind spun. Go back into the water meant certain death. Surrender meant chains, solitary, and never another chance. And then a deafening crash. The barge's anchor dropped into the water with a thunderous splash, the chain rattling inches from Marcus's head. The vibrations shook the ropes, nearly tearing him loose. Below, the patrol boats closed in. Above, guards shouted from the docks. Marcus looked into the black water one last time, the current pulling like a living thing. Then he looked at the floodlights, blinding and merciless. Two paths. Both dangerous. Both deadly. And in that moment, Marcus let go. The Black River. Marcus plunged back into the river. The cold was unbearable. It stabbed his skin like 1,000 knives. His body twisted in the current, waves hammering him down. Every time he surfaced, headlights and spotlights burned into his eyes before the water swallowed him again. His lungs screamed, begging for air. The roar of engines grew closer, the sound of guards shouting over megaphones echoing through the night. But Marcus kept pushing. Every kick, every stroke, was raw survival. Ahead, faint and distant, the outline of the city lights shimmered like a promise. For a moment, hope swelled. He was almost there. Then a violent wave slammed him sideways, pulling him beneath the barge's hull. He fought, clawing, his vision dimming. His arms felt like they no longer belonged to him. And then, silence. Darkness. The shoreline mystery. Morning came. The East River's surface rippled under the pale sun. Patrol boats scoured the water, combing every stretch. Guards shouted, divers plunged beneath the waves. But there was no Marcus. Some said he drowned, dragged under by the current. Others whispered he slipped past, reaching the far shore unseen. A few even claimed he had help, that the older inmate who vanished in the chaos pulled him to safety. The truth? Nobody knew. And that's the terrifying beauty of Rikers Island's escape stories. The line between myth and reality blurs. Some names are etched in paperwork, stamped with deceased. Others vanish, leaving behind only whispers, stories, and unanswered questions. The legend of escape. Inside Rikers, Marcus's attempt became legend. Some mocked him as a fool. Others spoke his name in awe. For the new inmates, his story was a warning. The river eats men alive. For the veterans, it was proof. Maybe, just maybe, it can be done. Every escape attempt from Rikers Island carries the same weight. Not just punishment, but legacy. Even failure becomes a story told in hushed tones, a reminder that the dream of freedom never dies, even in the darkest place. And for Marcus, whether he drowned in those waters or found his way to the city lights, one thing was certain: he proved the unthinkable could be tried. The truth about escaping Rikers Island. The truth is simple and brutal. Escaping Rikers Island isn't about the fences. It isn't about the guards. It isn't even about the razor wire. It's about survival. It's about betrayal, politics, silence, and the river, that black, merciless river that swallows men whole. Most who try fail. Some vanish. A few become legends whispered about in the shadows. But one fact remains: Rikers Island is more than just a jail. It's a trap, suspended between water and fear. And even when someone tries to break free, the island finds a way to pull them back in. So the next time you hear about someone escaping Rikers Island, remember this: the real story isn't whether they made it past the walls. It's whether they survived what waited on the other side. Because escaping Rikers Island isn't the end. It's only the beginning.